Episode 35, The Fall of 1837. Welcome to the Hidden and Distorted History of the Church series, where we will be looking at the historical aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. In this series, I will try and inform those unaware of the true facts of Mormon history. Recap. Last week, we unraveled the chaos surrounding the collapse of the Kirtland Safety Society, a financial disaster orchestrated by Joseph Smith that left the community reeling. We exposed the scandalous expulsion of Fanny Alger from Kirtland, driven by Emma Smith's fury over her husband's secret marriage. And we uncovered the shameless deceit of Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, Oliver Cowdery, and Sidney Rigdon as they embarked on a treasure-hunting escapade in Salem, all while feeding the members a fabricated tale about a missionary trip to convert souls. This week, we uncover the explosive showdown as the First Presidency and top church authorities order a non-Mormon justice of the peace, Ariel Hanson, to depart forthwith out of Kirtland. We'll expose the church's first introduction of tithing. Spoiler alert, it's not the familiar 10% of income you might think. Witness the dramatic collapse of the Kirtland Safety Society as Sidney Rigdon declares the end of paper note redemptions, accepting only land or hard assets, leaving chaos in its wake. And if that's not enough, Joseph Smith is dragged back into court yet again, this time in a bitter legal battle with Grandison Newell. Don't miss this explosive episode. Part 1, Justice of the Not-So-Peaceful. Ariel Hanson wasn't just a justice of the peace in Kirtland, Ohio. He was a principled legal authority standing up to Joseph Smith and his inner circle. By 1836, Hanson's efforts to enforce the law and investigate the operations of the Kirtland Safety Society, the controversial and unlicensed banking venture run by Smith and Sidney Rigdon, led to direct conflict. The Mormon leadership saw Hanson's interference as a threat to their unchecked power, prompting them to organize a petition that essentially demanded Hanson's removal from Kirtland. This petition was no simple grievance. It was a clear attempt to expel a local official who refused to overlook the church's questionable practices. The LDS Church later downplayed Hanson's role, describing him as an irritator of the Mormons. According to a BYU account, Oliver Cowdery served as the Justice of the Peace in Kirtland, Ohio from June to September 1837, a short period of time, but he still heard a large number of cases, 230. Cowdery was elected on the 29th of April 1837, beating the other candidate, Samuel Gore, by a vote of 211 to 2. The votes were taken in the little schoolhouse in the Flats. Cowdery replaced Ariel Hanson, an irritator of the Mormons. As Justice of the Peace, Oliver Cowdery's tenure was characterized by efficiency, equanimity, and decisiveness. This framing paints Hanson as a mere obstacle, rather than recognizing his role in upholding the law. He wasn't irritating the Mormons. He was one of the few officials in Kirtland bold enough to stand against their growing influence. In the end, the church's influence proved too strong and Hanson was forced out. Joseph Smith then installed an ally in the role of Justice of the Peace, not just Oliver Cowdery, but also Frederick G. Williams, ensuring that the legal system in Kirtland was effectively under church control. This systematic takeover left no room for dissenting voices like Hanson's, demonstrating the church's determination to consolidate power by removing any obstacles to their expansion. Hanson's situation serves as a part of the larger backdrop of legal and social issues that the early Latter-day Saints faced in Ohio, particularly as their growing political and economic influence began to conflict with established local authorities and laws. Part 2, A Policy of Tithing. In the early 1830s, the concept of tithing emerged as a component of the law of consecration, a system central to the church's economic structure. This early practice was overseen by Edward Partridge, the church's first bishop, who defined tithing as 2% of a member's net worth, paid annually, a far cry from the 10% income standard practiced today. Let's explore how this system functioned and why it ultimately changed. During this period, a bishop's responsibilities extended far beyond the spiritual duties commonly associated with the role today. Partridge's role encompassed both spiritual and temporal responsibilities, making him a steward of church finances, a distributor of aid to the poor, and a caretaker of members' temporal welfare. In essence, Bishops acted as quasi-governors of church resources, managing the delicate balance between communal goals and individual needs. This contrasts sharply with the modern bishop's role, which is primarily spiritual, focusing on tasks like overseeing sacrament meetings, conducting worthiness interviews, and offering pastoral care. Today's bishops manage financial affairs within a globalized, centralized organization, whereas Partridge faced the challenges of building a fledgling community from scratch, often with little more than faith and scarce resources. Partridge's 2% tithing policy was designed to cover the church's operating expenses, such as constructing meeting houses, supporting missionaries who initially did not pay their own way, and aiding the poor. This modest rate was practical given the dire economic realities faced by the early saints. Many members lived in poverty and were struggling to establish themselves in communities like Kirtland, Ohio, and later Missouri. However, financial instability, compounded by the mismanagement of both church funds and members' assets by Joseph Smith and other leaders, created significant challenges. This approach reflected the church's communal aspirations. Leaders envisioned a self-sustaining religious community where resources were pooled and shared to meet everyone's needs. Partridge's modest tithing requirement aimed to ensure even the poorest members could contribute. Unfortunately, this idealistic system faltered as economic hardships persisted, and members increasingly questioned the decisions of Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon. The saints' financial struggles exposed cracks in the leadership's grand vision, leading to dissent and mistrust. The 2% tithing model was part of a larger economic framework tied to the law of consecration. Members were expected to consecrate all surplus property to the church, after which they would receive a stewardship, essentially an allotment of resources sufficient to meet their needs and wants. Tithing, calculated as 2% of net worth, was intended to sustain the church's ongoing operations. By 1838, the 2% tithing model was abandoned, as the church faced mounting financial pressures and upheavals, including the relocations to Missouri and Illinois. Joseph Smith introduced a new revelation, now canonized as Doctrine and Covenants 119, which redefined tithing. Members were directed to first donate all their surplus property and then pay 1/10 of all their interest annually. Over time, this ambiguous phrasing evolved into the modern practice of tithing as 10% of annual income, solidified in the 20th century under church leadership. This redefinition of tithing, combined with the broader demands of consecration, has led critics to accuse Joseph Smith of using financial policies as a means of consolidating power and wealth. By requiring members to consecrate property and commit to ongoing tithing, Smith gained control over significant resources, often to the detriment of already struggling followers. Such policies fueled suspicions that Smith and other leaders were hoarding wealth under the guise of divine revelation, further straining trust between leadership and the rank-and-file members. Edward Partridge's modest 2% tithing policy reflects an era of idealism and practical need. However, as economic pressures mounted and the church's ambitions expanded, the system gave way to a much stricter financial structure, one that continues to spark debate about the motives and methods of early church leadership. Part 3. Kirtland Safety Society Crumbles. In January 1837, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon launched the ill-fated Kirtland Safety Society, a financial venture we discussed in the last video. Almost immediately, trouble arose. The Ohio legislature denied the bank's incorporation, citing insufficient capital to back it up. Undeterred, Joseph pressed forward, claiming divine approval. Wilford Woodruff recorded that Joseph gave a revelation to continue the operation despite the legal rejection. Woodruff wrote, "I attended a meeting in the evening of the firm. President Joseph Smith, Jr. spoke in the spirit of prophecy, saying that if we would give heed to his counsel, we should never fall, but should have power to go forth and accomplish great things. And that though the Kirtland Safety Society should fail, yet it would not fail as soon as the United States would." This prophetic assurance failed to inspire confidence outside the church. Heber C. Kimball later recalled that Joseph continued encouraging members to support the bank, promising divine blessings for their faithfulness. However, the cracks in the venture were becoming undeniable. On January 18, 1837, the Cleveland Weekly Gazette issued a damning warning to the public. The paper called Rigdon a notorious hypocrite and knave, and accused Smith of intending to take up what little money the members have and depart hence. This scathing criticism wasn't baseless. It reflected growing regional unease over the Safety Society's mismanagement and the apparent exploitation of vulnerable members. Remarkably, the Gazette's grim prediction proved accurate within days, something Joseph's supposed prophecies had failed to achieve. The Kirtland Safety Society collapsed spectacularly. The bank's notes, already viewed with suspicion, quickly became worthless. Members and investors were left destitute, their financial futures shattered. Meanwhile, Smith and Rigdon, under mounting pressure and facing accusations of fraud, fled Kirtland under cover of darkness to escape enraged creditors and disillusioned followers. Even as the situation unraveled, Rigdon continued urging members to support the failing bank. The Safety Society stopped accepting its own paper notes, demanding instead hard assets like land or gold. This shift made one thing clear. Joseph and Sidney were scrambling to extract whatever value they could before their inevitable departure. The collapse of the Kirtland Safety Society wasn't just a financial disaster. It was a betrayal. Members who had trusted their prophet and his supposed divine revelations were left to face financial ruin, while Joseph and Sidney abandoned their community in pursuit of their next refuge. Once again, Smith's promises of divine support fell flat, leaving a legacy of broken trust and shattered livelihoods. Part 4, Joe Goes to Court Again. Legal troubles surrounding Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, and the Kirtland Safety Society came to a head when charges were filed against them for violating Ohio's state banking laws. These charges, spearheaded by Samuel D. Rounds on behalf of Grandison Newell, were a calculated move to hold Smith and his associates accountable for the disastrous fallout of their unchartered banking venture. Grandison Newell, a relentless critic of Joseph Smith and a prominent local businessman, viewed Smith as a dangerous fraud who preyed on the trust and finances of his followers. Newell's disdain for Smith was not merely personal, but rooted in his belief that the prophet's financial schemes were destructive to the broader community. Through Rounds, Newell capitalized on the Kirtland Safety Society's collapse, leveraging the bank's legal violations as a means to strike at Smith's credibility and influence. On June 5, 1837, Smith, Rigdon, and 4 other church leaders were formally charged with operating an unchartered banking institution and issuing unauthorized currency in violation of Ohio law. These laws were designed to prevent precisely the kind of economic instability that the Kirtland Safety Society had wrought. For the church's leaders, this legal action was not just a matter of financial accountability. It was an existential threat to their already precarious standing in Kirtland. While the specifics of the case's resolution remain elusive, historical records provide no clear verdict. The broader consequences were clear. Smith and Rigdon, under mounting legal and social pressure, fled Kirtland for far west Missouri in early 1838. Their departure effectively ended any possibility of sentencing in this case. The move underscored a pattern of avoiding direct accountability, as the pair sought refuge in yet another promised land where they could rebuild their base of power. Yet again, as was the Smith family tradition, they fled from the law. The charges filed by Samuel Rounds, at Newell's behest, symbolized a broader reckoning with the dangers of mingling spiritual authority with unchecked temporal ambitions. While no formal conviction appears to have been recorded, the legal challenges highlighted the fragility of Smith's financial ventures and the growing resistance to his claims of prophetic leadership. It stands as a stark reminder of the turbulent intersection of faith, finances, and the law in the early history of the church. In conclusion, in 1837, Joseph Smith's ambitions brought the church to the brink of collapse, leaving behind financial ruin, legal entanglements, and shattered trust. From Ariel Hanson's expulsion to the flawed tithing policy and the catastrophic failure of the Kirtland Safety Society, Smith's leadership exposed a pattern of manipulation masked by divine claims. Legal challenges, like the charges filed by Grandison Newell, served as stark reminders of the dangers of unchecked power. As Smith and Rigdon fled Kirtland, they left a trail of broken promises, a cautionary tale of faith exploited for personal gain. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for the day.